Gene Shepard has a word for anybody who considers himself a telephone freak. Hey, have you ever dialed one of these things, that they advertise like that? Dial a gag. Have you ever actually done it? You have. Oh, but you're sorry. Have you ever seen the ones that say, dial a prayer? Well, there have been times when I've been tempted by that one. Especially at 3 o'clock in the morning when all the world looks like Fitzgerald's world. F. Scott Fitzgerald that said the whole world was composed of a vast attic where people were moving old furniture around. You know that kind of night. Well, you can dial a friend now in most major cities. Oh, yes. In fact, for guys that are fired, there is now a new service that's been breaking out in Chicago called Dial a Boss. If you are out of work, one of the worst problems of being out of work, of course, is that you have no authority figure in your life anymore. And you just sit around the house and watch daytime TV, which could be worse than going to, Alcatraz. And so every once in a while, you dial a boss, and he yells at you. Costs you $4 a month. And he tells you to get your file straight. Now, the best of them all has happened, and this is the fact. A toll-free number you can call now to dial an obscene phone call. I wonder how they audition people to give the obscene phone calls. Well, it costs you $19 a month, and you can get all types of obscene phone calls. You can get softcore, hardcore, or the kind you get arrested for, depending on how much you want to pay. And by the way, they guarantee to call you at all hours of the day and night, like a true obscene phone call. So it's 4 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, you jump up and you answer it, and some guy from Omaha is giving you the business. So, friends, life is moving forward, and we have a lot to thank Ma Bell for. Listen to Gene Shepard on his knees in thanks.
Shepard, and he has a word or two about some of the things you may wish not to believe in.
We're back again with one of our famous enduring 20th century myths. Now, as all of you know, I've pointed out recently that some people collect stamps, other people collect Ming China. Well, I collect enduring 20th century myths. And I must admit, this one I was definitely a victim of myself. I went home to visit my mother and my father, the old folks, and I went down in the basement. This was recently. And under the basement stairs, I found a gunny sack full of my past follies. I had a gunny sack filled with Wrigley spearmint gum wrappers. Because at one time there was a myth that you got a gum wrapper with the right number inside of it, and you sent it into the Wrigley Company, you could win probably the Empire State Building. Or my old man believed that if you got a Model A Ford in the right condition and took it down to the Ford dealer, he'd give you a new Lincoln Continental Ford. Have you ever heard that one? Of course, all of these American myths are continuing, and there are people who still believe if they took the Model A down there, they'd get a new Ford or a new Pinto Ford. Try it someday. Try collecting, say, old gold cigarette wrappers, because inside is a number, which, if properly numbered, properly figured out, you'd probably win your lifetime vacation in Bermuda. These are all myths, American myths, and they never stop. Let me tell you the one about Campbell soup, but I don't have the time. I'll be back. This is Gene Shepard, who incidentally is a myth himself.
And that answers the questions that people have been asking. Is Gene Shepard for real? 9 minutes now to 7 here at News 88.
CBS News Time is 2:38. And News 88's resident sage Gene Shepard is next with some observations on a man from Ohio who should be in the Guinness Book of Records.
Listen, I'd like to take the time now to really give a salute to what I consider one of the great American sportsmen. You know, there's never been a nation as crazy about sports as we are today. I mean, people are going bananas about everything. I mean, running. Eventually, there's going to be endurance sitting. Guys will prepare for that. They'll buy special chairs to sit in, and they'll be sold at Abercrombie and Fitch. Sports has just taken over like people are crazy about sports. And yet, the true sportsmen of our time are not truly honored. I would like to honor a man whose name, by the way, he wishes to keep anonymous. He is a school teacher in the city of Cleveland. Now, if he hears this, he'll know who we're talking about. Last season, this school teacher, equipped with a $16 Japanese fielder's mitt, went to the Cleveland Indians ball games and collected 147 foul balls. That is a fantastic record. Do you know that I've been going to baseball games ever since I was 9 and have not gotten within 40 feet of a foul ball? One foul ball. And the great ambition of every ball fan is to get a ball. I actually have 147 in one season. Do you realize this surpasses anything that any of the pitchers in the major leagues did last year? A great achievement. Well, let's see. I almost got a football once at Giant Stadium. You know, out here, I'm walking with a tray of hot dogs. Seriously, I had a tray of hot dogs. I had a big can of coffee, and I'm walking through the crowd when all of a sudden I got hit between the shoulder blades by a Garo Yepremian kick. I didn't get the ball, but I sure as heck got the coffee right in my mouth. This is Gene Shepard, and I always carry a fielder's mitt with me at all times. You never know when they're going to foul tip one at you.
Fielder's mitt isn't going to help much with the football, Gene. Try one of those big nets on a long stick. News 88 time is 2:41.
10 minutes to 11. And next, our friend Gene Shepard with a suggestion if you have any thoughts about exploring certain uncharted territory.
Hey, did you ever look in the closet of all, your closet? I'm talking about your clothes closet, see, and you've got a jam full of stuff, and it goes all the way to the back, and in fact, it's so filled that in the back now, you've forgotten what's in the back there. There's just dark stuff back there. And if you ever got back there, there'd be, who knows what, things would reach out and grab you with suckers on their feelers. I mean, you just don't go in that closet anymore. Well, the question that I want to bring up here at this point is, have you ever looked at all your stuff in your closet and wondered what you saw in it? Why you bought this? What made you think that turtleneck shirt with the V-neck, the one with the little squirrel on the sleeves, what made you think that was great looking? I mean, have you ever wondered about that? Have you ever taken a look at old pictures of yourself, even taken, say, 5, 6, 8, 9 years ago, and you wondered, why did I wear that? Look at that coat. Look at those stupid pants. What the heck is all that about? Well, I have a theory about that, as I have a theory about everything. I think that discontent is built into the human mind. You will always be discontented with what you did yesterday. And it's especially noticeable in clothing. I think eventually, when the dust has settled on our time, when the 20th century has disappeared into the vast canyons of time, just like the days of the pharaohs, they will look upon our age as the age of clothing. There's going to be great drifts of clothing found under the alluvial ash. Great thick drifts of vinyl skirts and jogging shoes. Fancy sweat socks, thousands of shirts, millions of pairs of corduroy pants, and endless things. And they'll wonder why we wore them and what we were trying to prove. Nobody knows. Certainly I don't. I have got closets that have over 30,000, 40,000 garments. And actually, I've only got 2 things that I ever wear. It'll never end. This is Gene Shepard, hoping that one day they'll come back with armor.
Wonder what the 2 things are he only ever wears. Gene Shepard, Monday through Friday at WCBS.
Shepard, I'll tell you, I must say that I'm in a little state of disarray today. Abercrombie & Fitch is no longer with us here in New York as such. And that is really, to me, depressing. Abercrombie & Fitch. Now, all these people who keep talking about what's happening to New York, I suspect they haven't even noticed that some of the great things in New York and have made New York what New York always was, a place of fantastic, overwhelming style, have slowly, on cat's feet, crept away from the world we know. Now, why Abercrombie? Abercrombie and Fitch goes back almost 100 years. I mean, F. Scott Fitzgerald strode through the halls of Abercrombie and Fitch looking for a decent tweed coat. Hemingway went to Abercrombie and Fitch to pick up another one of those pith helmets you wear when you're in Africa. And when he put it on his head, he shouted, "Fully!" Oh, that's Abercrombie and Fitch. That's not Gino's Burger Palace. And it slowly crept out of town. And what's it replaced by? Bloomingdale's. I'll tell you, there's a world of difference between style and fashion. We're a world of fashion today, and fashion is ever-changing. And not only that, it's self-destruct. What's today's fashion is tomorrow's joke. But Abercrombie & Fitch was pure style. Something died in New York when Mr. Abercrombie and Mr. Fitch's great store finally departed. I, for one, will weep its departure. This is Gene Shepard. Well, I guess it's inevitable.
Getting home and looking at what the mailman brought you? Let's hope you don't have the same experience that Gene Shepard recently had.
Hey, listen, I had a terrible thing happen to me the other day. I don't know quite how to say this, but it was a real bad scene. How many of you are fans of the old Charlie Chan movies? You remember Warner Oland, Charlie Chan? And he didn't look Chinese. Well, you know, it's hard to say. He had that white hat on. He always wore that Panama hat. And his secretary was always Raquel Hudson. This was a movie star. And I remember one scene when Charlie Chan was sitting in his office when Raquel Hudson, or was it Raquel Hudson came in with the mail. I mean, you don't think of Charlie Chan getting the morning mail, but he did in this scene. And he opened the mail up, and he says, what? He says, mysterious envelope. And he opens up the envelope, says, so. And out of the envelope tumbled one thing. Was it a letter? It was the ace of spades. And you knew immediately that Charlie Chan was in bad trouble. This morning, I am going through my usual drift of junk mail. Offers of $300 on my signature only. Fantastic offers from the Time Life Company of a 7,000 volume bound in Morocco leather. Copies of the Sanskrit transcription of the history of the world. Various other things that I need. When all of a sudden I opened a mysterious envelope and out dropped the ace of spades. Somebody out there is after me, and you're not going to get away with it.
Then political editorials have now changed places in our newspapers. Hey, have you noticed what's happening to comic strips lately? I mean, they're really getting political. Have you noticed that? Oh, well, sure. I mean, no comic strip makes you laugh anymore. It may make you mad, but they don't make you laugh. In fact, one day I was driving down one of the streets out in California, and inadvertently I'm driving past the newspaper office, and I see this big crowd out there, and they're marching around, and they're waving signs and protesting something, so I had to stop. I'm a sucker for a good protest. So I stopped, and I got out, got in line, and asked somebody to hand me a sign, and I'm walking around, and I said, well, I take a look at the sign, see what it is. And it says, Down with Doonesbury. They were protesting a cartoon strip called Doonesbury. Now, if you haven't seen Doonesbury recently, you know that cartoon strip is getting more political than the editorial page. In fact, many editorial pages these days read like the comic pages used to read. But nevertheless, comics are going in very curious directions. On the one hand, we have rampant Vikings walking around. You've seen the Viking cartoon. And we have Doonesbury and Tank McNamara. Tank McNamara has several times attacked the NFL right there in the comic strips. I don't know. This is Gene Shepard saying, I may be next. Well, in case you didn't notice it, this past Christmas was the Christmas of the battery-operated toys. Thousands of battery-operated toys of all types. Computers, little dingling games, little bears that hit timpanis, and all kinds of little things. In fact, you get an entire orchestra made up of teddy bears with steel on it, the whole contrabass, all operated by C batteries. So this indeed was the year of the battery. Right about now, right about this time of the year, all the toys that were so great on Christmas Eve have now run out of juice, and there are no batteries to run them, and they're just laying around the house, just plain ordinary lumps, like anything that doesn't have any current or any power to run it. In fact, the other day I ran into my friend Stanley, who has a 10-year-old kid who's thinking about all of these battery-operated toys, and he's looking kind of moody. And I said, Stanley, what's the matter? He said, well, you know, he said, it was bad enough buying all those batteries for the toys in the first place. He says, but now they've all run out of juice. And he said, I spent over $40 today just buying toy batteries. He says, it's costing more to run my kids' toy cars than it is costing me to run my own car. This is stupid. It certainly is, Stanley. This is Gene Shepard sitting here saying, maybe the entire world needs a new charger. Piece could be entitled Show Business Marches On. They recently took a poll of 7th graders in Iowa. Now, I don't know anything about 7th graders in Iowa, but I guess they're like 7th graders anywhere else, you know, walking around eating fudgesicles and stuff. And they took this poll and asked these kids what they'd like to be when they grow up. 47.3% of them said a star. 22% were undecided, and 5% wanted to be a celebrity. The others just were fooling around. They didn't answer the question at all, which is probably the most logical and certainly the most honest answer, because who knows what you're going to be when you're in 7th grade. But 47% wanted to be a star. Now, they didn't want to act, or they didn't want to sing. They didn't want to study dramatics or do Shakespeare. They just wanted to be a star, which is a new occupation of our time, produced by television, who knows what. In fact, this starism is getting to be such a big national mania. The other day, I'm driving along one of the major routes along the eastern seaboard here, minding my own business, trying to get my cigar lighter to work on the dash of the car, when all of a sudden, out of the darkness comes this sign on a gas station. It says, now appearing limited engagement, foreign car repairs by Charlie Witherspoon, here for only 2 weeks. A star. He's there to grind your valves, and of course gets a round of applause and certainly has an agent too. This is Gene Shepard sitting here saying, wait till Charlie gets on the cover of TV Guide. Well, I suppose you, like everybody else who is walking around and alive in this day and age, listens to a great deal of news. I mean, it comes out of the radio all the time. You watch TV news at night. A lot of people are even hung on news, the way other people are hung on morphine or cocaine. They just want to hear news day and night. But I'm not that type, because it seems like all news that I hear these days is bad news. And in fact, almost all of it has to do with the dollar, the good old dollar that everybody's pursuing, that strange will-o'-the-wisp that keeps ducking into the bushes. And then when you catch it, it's not worth a darn thing, the dollar. But I have to say this. One of the earliest remembrances I have about news was when I was a kid. I remember my Uncle Fred sitting around always saying, the dollar ain't what she used to be. The dollar isn't worth what it was, and the dollar ain't worth nothing no more. Well, that was a long time ago. That was over 200-300 years ago. They've been saying that ever since I was a kid. I can't remember when they said the dollar is worth what it always was worth. Was the dollar ever worth anything? I imagine 10 minutes after George Washington threw that dollar over was it the Rappahannock? Or was it the Susquehanna? It certainly wasn't the Passaic River. But when he threw that dollar over, somebody picked it up and says, you know, this dollar ain't worth what it used to be. This is Gene Shepard sitting here, and I guess I ain't worth what I used to be either. Have you noticed how recently more and more people are prying into your business without so much as by your leave? I mean, they send you these questionnaires, and they just expect you to answer right off the bat. I mean, why? Well, because they want to know. That's all there is to it. It's the public's right to know everything about you. Well, the other day, I got a questionnaire in the mail from some magazine, you know, one of these conducting a poll on showbiz people on how they got their start and all that. At first, I was a little bugged, you know. I don't want to talk about my past like that, being a modest man. But nevertheless, this one question got me. It says,
When you were a child, what did you want to be? Did you want to be in show business? Are you kidding? No, the first thing I wanted to be at the age of 9, I clipped out a coupon that ran in Boy's Life. The ad said, earn big money in taxidermy. Showed a guy with a stuffed squirrel with a lampshade on his head, and it looked like a really fun job. Well, they sent me a sample lesson. I took one look at what it takes to be a taxidermist. With all those knives and all that awful stuff. Forget it. The next coupon I sent in, I was 11, and I sent it into a place that said, earn big money in police work. And it was the International School of Secret Detection in Kansas City, Missouri. They sent me a lesson. I took one look at it. It shows a guy getting hit on the head with a blackjack. I haven't decided yet what I want to be when I grow up. Not really. This is Gene Shepard sitting here, and I'm filling out another ad, and maybe this is the one. If you are an Inspector Clouseau fan, you know Peter Sellers' great character, Inspector Clouseau, who was always looking for a bim in his car, the great inspector of French police. Well, here is a case that he could have handled well. In fact, he might have been there, possibly handled it. French police have been made to look foolish. The resourceful Jacques Mazarin, a violent criminal with a lust for publicity. He's been sending letters to the French TV people. He's been sending letters to the police. He sends postcards wherever he goes when he's made an escapade. Well, the other day, the French police had tracked him down and had him absolutely dead to rights in an apartment. It looked like they had him at long last. Thousands of police came charging up the stairs when suddenly the door flew open. A figure appeared in the door who ran dashing out of the hallway. He cried, "Quick!" He pointed to a window, and the police leaped out of the window and ran over the rooftop looking for Mazarin. And it was Mazarin himself who had made that brilliant coup. He escaped in his Peugeot and has not been seen for the last 2 weeks. He is still sending cards, however, to Inspector Clouseau, who led that crowd of police over the rooftops and into the darkness. This is Gene Shepard saying, "Quick, the boom is about to go off."
The other evening, I was at a party, and one of these spontaneous games broke out. You know, the kind of games that are roughly related to trivia and questions about how many movies Peter Lorre made. But this one really was interesting. Can you name, in fact, I should really restate it and say, how many can you name of living presidential candidates of the major parties? I mean, you can start right out with Barry Goldwater, right? And how about McGovern? Okay, where do you go from there? I'm talking about presidential candidates. Then when you've finished naming those, remember, they all have to be alive, walking around, and they also have to have been candidates of the major parties. You'd be surprised that there are some of them that go way, way back. Are you aware that Alfred Landon is still alive? Oh, yes. And he was a presidential candidate. He ran against Roosevelt. So how many can you name? And then if it really gets tough at the party, how many vice presidential candidates who are alive can you name? In fact, how many vice presidential candidates of any category can you name? For example, who ran for vice president under Adlai Stevenson the last time Stevenson ran? There's a good one for you. Who was Humphrey's running mate the last time Humphrey ran for the presidency? That's not as easy a question as you think. Who ran for president against John F. Kennedy? And who was his vice presidential candidate? Oh, it's to be a very tough game. It's the kind of game that can wind up with people sitting at the bar angrily yelling at each other. One guy saying he's alive, another one saying no, he's not. It goes all the way back. But these games are fascinating, particularly ones that relate to politics. For example, there was a big discussion the other day at a party that I was at as to who T. Lamar Caudle was. Remember him? Sherman Adams. What did he do? But these are games that could while away many a happy hour while the bourbon flows freely. This is Gene Shepard sitting here amid the campaign buttons of the years past. Something, and about 3 weeks later wondered why in the heck you did it.
I mean, you really wondered why you did it. Take a look in your closet now. There are probably 500 things in your closet. When you look at them, you wonder, why did I buy that? How many of you bought a car or a house or something? 3 or 4 weeks later, you say, what got into me? Why this? Well, have you ever heard of something called hypmovation? Hypmovation, hypmovation. This is a newest sales technique. It's sales by hypnosis. And it's being taught all over the country. It could very well have happened to you. You sit down there, you know, and you're walking around the sales room, and you're looking at these terrible-looking cars, and all of a sudden you're seized by an uncontrollable desire to have one. You could very well be hypnotized. Yes, it's the newest sales tool in the modern arsenal of American business, hypnovation. And it could very well go all the way. It could elect the next president. I mean, you're sitting there, and all of a sudden this guy's looking out at you, and he says, look into my eyes, and the next thing you know, you're voting for what looks like a turtle. This is Gene Shepherd saying, you could very well be hypnotized right now by the sound of my voice.
By their arts ye shall know them. A famous legendary pundit once said, and I love to quote legendary famous pundits carved out of stone, and they say things like, by their arts ye shall know them. But what he meant was, you can tell what a civilization is like by the kind of arts that it makes important, that it really enjoys. And if this is so, I believe we are in trouble. As a matter of fact, we're probably the first civilization that will eventually solve the problem of being adolescent continually throughout its entire life. For example, where else but in America could major $20 million movies be made with the character Superman as the leading character? First, there was Annie, who appeared on our Broadway stage and is about to be made into a movie. I mean, this is really basic comic strip material. Superman. They tell me now that Batman is about to be made into a movie. Also, Doc Savage is on his way. And what about that old legendary hero that almost everybody's forgotten, Flash Gordon? Can he be far behind? Do you remember, from the planet Mongo? Or was it, well, who cares? But nevertheless, by their arts ye shall know them. And so, we're the first nation in all of history to be totally adolescent from cradle to grave, sitting there year after year, reading and enjoying Superman. This is Gene Shepherd saying, see me in the comics. Well, I have another confession to make. At long last, I had to give in and join an organization that I have not wanted to join for ages, and I finally did it. The organization has the initials BRAHMS, which stands, of course, for Brahms. And what is this organization? Well, it's an organization devoted to the care and treatment and the solace of people just like myself who are underground music fans. I'm talking about classic music fans. You know, I find myself constantly, continually apologizing to people because I love classical music. In fact, many times when people come to my apartment and I've got Vivaldi on or something like that, I rush to the stereo and turn it off and throw on Meatloaf. Why? Because I want to become part of the mainstream, and every time I have anything decent like Bach or Brahms on, somebody's going to say, what are you listening to that stuff for? So I have joined Brahms. And what does the acronym stand for? Beleaguered, rabid, avid, harassed, majestic sound freaks. And if any of you out there would like to join, you just send your letter to me in a plain brown sealed wrapper so that no one will know, and you'll get your card by the next mail. And we shall arise. This is Gene Shepherd saying, Bach lives. Well, I suppose I have to admit this. I really hate to admit it. I got a letter the other day from a sport fan. It said, Shepherd, you're on the radio and on television and all that, and probably you know all these people, Howard Cosell and everybody. I mean, you must know Frank Gifford and all those famous football players and stuff. What do you think is going to win the playoffs? What playoffs was the only question I could give him an answer to. What playoffs? I mean, these playoffs have been going on for years.
I mean, with the way the playoff scene is going today and the bowl game scene is going today, I think by the year 2000, we're going to have 24-hour-a-day continuous football. 7 days a week, year in and year out, spring, summer, fall, and winter. There will be playoffs at all times. In fact, I think it's a distinction today for a team not to make the playoffs, as every team apparently does. I mean, some teams have had like 3 victories, 15 defeats, 7 ties, and they didn't show up for 4 games, but they're in the playoffs. So I guess that's the name of the game, the playoffs. Wouldn't it be great if they had playoffs in industry? I mean, at the end of every season, if IBM played off against AT&T and National Cash Register was the lucky card or the ace in the hole card team ready to come in if one of the others didn't make it, I mean, just an idea, just a thought. And we could televise it. Get Howard Cosell to do the color commentary. This is Gene Shepard sitting here waiting for that great playoff in the sky. For all Americans, I mean really good Americans, I'm a student of status symbols. I remember a few years ago when the status symbol was the automobile. The bigger the car, the higher the status. The more elegant the foreign car, the more important you were. Well, what with the energy crunch and the way gasoline prices are going and all that sort of good news stuff via the OPEC countries, that is no longer the main status symbol. But what is the status symbol today? Well, I'll tell you what it is. Kitchen gadgets. Status symbols today circle and center on the kitchen. The other day I visited 2 of my friends who are really into status. I mean, they're into status. They go to all the newest discos and they see all the John Travolta movies and they pretend they like the Lord of the Rings and the whole business. And they have a kitchen you wouldn't believe. They have a food processor that I would say rivals Inland Steel for its ability to do mechanical and industrial processes. This thing could grind up iron rails if it wanted to. And it costs $700. They're proud of it. It's got knobs and dials and all that. They have a $250 espresso machine. Now, the sad part is they don't drink coffee. And they're both on diets. Now, they don't use that machine for anything. They just turn it off and on once in a while. Look at it. And their greatest status symbol is a microwave oven that covers one entire wall of their kitchen. The true status symbol today is the kitchen. And all these people do is eat yogurt. This is Gene Shepard asking whatever happened to Metrocap. The other day I heard a famous nutritionist say that one thing about animals, they always know what's good for them. They only eat that which is necessary for their good nutritional health. If that isn't a lot of pap. He went on to say also that these animals, of course, will never touch things like alcohol. Did I ever tell you about Hank, the German shepherd I knew who used to come into Flick's Tavern when I was a kid? He'd get a snootful every night and wouldn't leave until they gave him maybe 4 or 5 ounces of the best bourbon that they could lay their hands on. Well, now, what about those elephants in Africa who will go 50 miles just to eat fermented apple to get a buzz on? And then there's the mouse in Birmingham, Alabama, that recently was caught eating all the evidence in a big marijuana bus case. And he came back night after night and chewed away at all that marijuana in the drawer of the sheriff until finally he ate it all up. And they call him now SIBO. And what is SIBO? That is the slang name for the Colombian marijuana. That's the best stuff available. And that's the only kind he eats. He won't even eat the ordinary marijuana that they confiscate from their usual street bust. He waits till the good stuff comes in. And night after night, he gnaws away at those nickel bags. And not only that, the sheriff says he ain't afraid of nothing. He chased one of our deputies all around the office the other day when he was hiring a kite. This is Gene Shepard saying, look out, they're on the march. This is a warning for those of you who don't listen to old slogans, old mottos, and feel that they're nothing but pap. There is an old Russian saying that goes, he who meets buffalo on road to town should play a waiting game. Listen to what happened to comrade motorist D. Putzikoff. He met 2 buffalo on the way to town, and the town was Patsikoya. Well, he was driving along, and all of a sudden these 2 giant buffalo were walking along the road ahead of him. And what did Patsikoff do? Well, I quote the newspaper Trud. He should have stopped and waited for them to pass. But instead, Patsikoff decided to frighten them by blowing his horn loudly. This angered the animals, and the one closest to the car charged, ramming its horns into the radiator and pushing the car backward. At that point, the other buffalo ran around the back and gave the car a smash in the trunk. He was driving a small four-cylinder Volga. For 90 minutes, Comrade Potsikoff lay flat on the floor of his car while the buffalo attacked front and rear, side and back, again and again, until it was hard to, and we quote the paper again, to recognize what was left of the car. Potsikoff did the wrong thing that day, Trude said. This is Gene Shepard saying, be careful who you blow your horn at. Almost always it's bad news. Well, here is a good story out of Cleveland. The other day, two patrolmen were driving around looking for traffic violators when they came upon this car that was double parked right in the middle of town. And sitting in the front seat was this guy, and he was giving this girl a fantastically passionate kiss. While they double parked, he had his flashers on. The cop looked at him and says, well, we'll go around the block, and by the time they finished their kiss, then probably things are going to be all right. So they drove around the block, and when they got back, there they were, still sitting there, still kissing passionately. So the cop says, hey, fella, move on. The guy ignored him, continued to kiss. He says, come on, we're going to give you a ticket. And he still ignored him. At that point, the cop wrote out a ticket, stuck it under the windshield wiper. They still didn't move. Finally, the cop says, move this car, buddy. You're blocking traffic. Still no response. They called the tow truck. The tow truck jacked the thing up in the back and towed him off to the city hall, still embracing passionately and kissing up a fantastic storm. The cop shook his head and said, ain't never seen nothing like it. Cost him $51. When I asked him why he did it, the guy looked at me and says, it was worth it. Well, there's not much in Cleveland, but there sure is romance. This is Gene Shepard saying, come on, Rob. Last few months, well, actually the last couple of weeks, there has been a great exercise in nostalgia appearing on network television, and I for one, really have enjoyed it. The old James Bond movies have been appearing, and they have a great period quality about them. I mean, somehow the 1960s have aged quicker than any decade that I can remember in recent centuries. I mean, all of a sudden, the James Bond movies seem about as real as Pearl White, The Perils of Pauline. But they have such great style. And the one thing about Bond, of course, was that he had real villains. I mean, I can tell you one of the reasons why the hero has disappeared from American movies and American fictions, the real hero, is that villains have disappeared. A hero is no better than the villain he pursues. Where would Sherlock Holmes have been without Moriarty? They are absolutely necessary. One goes with the other. And James Bond had Blofeld, the evil Blofeld. And how about Goldfinger? Oh, there was a villain. And how about Rosa Krebs? She had those terrible poisoned knives in her feet. She'd kick her shoes up, and those poisoned knives would lash out. And Dr. No. Ah, James Bond, where are you when we need you today? This is Gene Shepard saying, Bond was truly great. He lives. One of the more endearing and opaque madnesses of our time, when the time comes years from now when they begin to write about the curiosi of our epoch, our period, is the continuing madness of the UFO. Flying saucer cuckoos are always with us. They keep popping up about every 4 years with great sightings in places like western Zanzibar or places like Overshoe, Mississippi. Have you noticed that almost everybody that sees one of these UFOs is driving a pickup truck? And he has a wife named Emmy. Usually they're cat lovers, and occasionally they grow carrots in their backyard. I've never heard of a guy driving a Jaguar seeing a UFO. Matter of fact, there was a recent series of studies made on that, and they found that over 74% of the people who see UFOs live in the southern half of the United States. Occasionally, not always, square dance, and over 40% of them drive 10-year-old pickup trucks or older. And often believe in astrology. They tend to go to chiropractors, and they tend to spend a good bit of their time standing around chewing tobacco. Now, for heaven's sakes, when is all this madness going to stop? And what does it all mean? There goes another one. Look at that little devil. This is Gene Shepard sitting here with the little green man gnawing at his kneecap.